This is Rick Miller, and I'm doing a review of Pat Evans' article, Future of Basketball Trending Toward a More Beautiful Global Game. Pat Evans introduces Zion Williamson when he begins the article, as Zion was playing at Duke at the time, and introduces the idea that the next great NBA prospect could come from a different pipeline than the traditional collegiate path. And so far that has been true, as RJ Hampton and LaMelo Ball are both Americans playing professionally overseas. Although LaMelo Ball has definitely have different circumstances than the average NBA prospect. RJ Hampton is still a sign that playing professionally overseas is still a viable way to get drafted into the NBA, even if you're an American-born player. Another player that proved that was Emmanuel Mudiay, who was drafted in 2014 by the Nuggets. Pat Evans also mentions players that have been training domestically and then go into the draft and enter the G League. Some of these players are like Anfernee Simons, who plays for the Portland Trailblazers, who's been playing pretty well this season, and Mitchell Robinson for the New York Knicks, also trained and then went through the G League process. Although Pat Evans didn't mention those players specifically, he did mention that players were training domestically instead of going to college, which is not as common in the NFL or other sports. Next, Pat Evans also talks about how basketball is evolving in other ways. He has a dialogue with Chris Bosh about the changes to youth basketball, and Chris Bosh hopes for a change from the tournament style that the AAU circuit has to become more focused towards development and making players more well-rounded rather than just trying to get everybody to get wins and tournament wins and getting the best players. They want to. Chris Bosh thinks that they should model their plan after the European youth training that starts whenever they're 13 with a club and just focuses on making them well-rounded players. Pat Evans also talks about the increase in global scouting. Scouting has obviously become way more effective in the last few years. For the past few decades, you would have gotten your top flight Euro players that have come in, like Dirk Nowitzki, but before a few years ago, they were often looked at as to be soft and that they weren't worth the pick, and that traditional collegiate athlete was still the way to go. You could even see that a couple of years ago with the Kings passing on Luka Doncic, who had pretty much as good of EuroLeague resume as you could have, and drafting Marvin Bagley. Uh, and scouts, Pat Evans also goes on to describe how scouts will find you no matter where you are in the world, what competition level you have. If you have the talent to play in the league, you'll find you. Pat Evans uses the example that if you're on a beach in Fiji, that teams will still find you if you're the best player there. My overall critique of Pat Evans' article is that I think he could have mentioned that these other pathways to the NBA will start to kill the NCAA system as they take away five-star recruits and they get lured away to play for money and to get better draft picks and to sell their name and likeness maybe. I have to agree with him. Global scouting has obviously gotten better as some of the best players are from overseas. Giannis Antetokounmpo never played in college. Luka Doncic never played in college. Rudy Gobert, Kristaps Porzingis, all these players are all-stars that never stepped foot on the NCAA hardwood. Uh, as he mentions his dialogue with Chris Bosh and changing the AAU system to become more developmental centric, I think That would be a great idea. I don't know if how long that would take to change the whole AAU circuit, but as you can see, European success. All these players, Giannis, Luka, Kristaps, are all known for being d- developmental, well-rounded players, and that's from the training that they have received overseas. And so I think if we saw some of our top athletes like Zion Williamson, maybe if he was under a more developmental AAU system, then maybe he would be a better shooter or a better ball handler, a better passer than he is right now. I used Front Office Sports for my article. And the question I wanted to leave everybody with was, what pathway would you choose to the NBA if you were a five-star recruit? Would you get paid overseas, go D1, or would you train until the draft and hope to go through the G League and take your chances? Thanks for listening.